Hey, how's it going, folks? Mike from LI Flies Mike here, and today we're going to be tying a variation of the surf candy. As always, the full list of materials will be down in the description below. We're going to be using a Gamakatsu SL12S in size 2. Getting started here with some Bill's Bodi Braid, or any flat diamond braid for that matter. We're just going to tie this in and wrap this forward and build a nice little pearl body for the material that we're going to be gluing on later. This body braid section will actually help secure the material when we glue it by giving it something to grab onto when we cure the resin. We're going to work our thread forward, and then we're going to go ahead and take some white bucktail here. Now, it's important when tying surf candies with bucktail, or any material for that matter, to take all the shorter hairs out of the way. So we're going to thin the shorter hairs out of the way and then tie in our bucktail. And what you see me do a lot of times is pulling this material. I like to make sure that the material is nice and secured well before moving on to the next section. So next we're going to take some crystal flash here, and this is some pearl crystal flash. I'm just going to take one piece, cut it in half, and then we end up with 4 pieces when we fold it. So I'm just going to tie this in here right at the front. And then we're going to go ahead and take some chartreuse bucktail. And just like with the white bucktail, we're going to take all the shorter hairs out of the way so we don't have any shorter hairs getting in the way when we're gluing up the body of the fly. It's important when tying bucktail surf candies to try and be as neat as possible with your thread, so we end up with a nice clean thread head to work with. If not, it could be much harder in the later stages when you're trying to get a nice clean surf candy body. So now this is where the variation of the classic bucktail surf candy comes into play. We're going to be taking some saddle hackle. This is some whiting American rooster hackle that's barred, some chartreuse barred hackle. And what we're going to do is we're going to tie this in almost tented, if you will, right on top of our bucktail. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to strip some of the excess feathers out of the way so we can work with it easier. It's important to use a somewhat thin saddle hackle here so it's easier to glue with. You'll see later on. By tying the hackle in at a semi 45-degree angle, if you will, we'll not only get a really nice profile to the fly, we'll get that nice barred hackle sitting up top. Just trying to get these feathers to lay nice and flat here on the fly. So now we're going to throw a whip finish in here and tie this off, and I'm just going to adjust the hook in the vise so it's easier to glue. And then I'll go ahead and clean up the head here. You can always tweak some of the feathers with the scissors if you got any stragglers, but you'll be able to manipulate it with the resin here in a sec. So now taking 3/16 stick-on eyes, you can get these from saltwaterflies.com. I'm going to use a little super glue. Now I do this to stop the eyes from separating from the material when we apply the UV resin. With bucktail, generally you can get away with it. But with the feathers, I find when the resin gets underneath the eyes, it'll cause it to separate and start moving around. So it's important to glue them down. So now taking some medium resin here, we're going to build up our first coat, the backbone of the surf candy body. So a trick here is to apply the resin towards the front of the fly and then work the resin backwards. Because if you start moving the resin towards the front of the fly, the feathers are going to start going all over the place. So applying that resin in the front, working our way back, and then lifting off when we get towards the back. And once we work that resin in and get the feathers shaped the way we like it and the surf candy body built up, we're going to cure our first coat here. And it's important to rotate the vise as you're curing it before letting go, because sometimes bucktail can start moving around. It's a lot harder to get a nice clean body with bucktail as it is opposed to the synthetic materials. So we're going to go with a second coat of medium here. I'd rather do 2 light coats of medium as opposed to 1 heavy one, because the resin can run on you. So it's nice to be able to fill in a lot of the deeper gaps, imperfections, because it's hard to get a perfect first coat with the medium, or thick for that matter. So I'm going to apply the resin, work it around, and hit it with the light again. And one thing is, with bucktail surf candies in general, or this feather candy, is with the natural materials, like I said, it's harder to get a cleaner body. So you may need to work the resin around a little bit more, trying to manipulate it to get that nice shape that you're looking for. And if you need to, you can always add more resin. The only thing I recommend is always do light coats. Try to avoid applying too much at one time. So there's a little gap on the one side where the feather lifted. So you can see I'm working a little bit more medium resin into those crevices, because any sort of gaps underneath the UV resin body can crack when fishing and cause the fly to break over time. You definitely get a feel for how much resin to apply over time and working the resin and trying to work with it in your favor. So it's something you get over time and just working with UV resin. So now we're going to take some thin UV resin here, and this is going to help. This is a much thinner viscosity, so it's going to flow much quicker, and it's going to fill in a lot of the imperfections on the fly here. Working this in, giving some time, allowing the thin resin to spread naturally and fill in all the imperfections, and then we'll go ahead and hit it with the light. So generally what I do is about 2 coats of medium and then a coat of thin. That's the general method that I use for gluing up surf candies. As always, working the light, try not to stay with the light on one spot for too long, because you can cause yellowing in the UV resin if you overheat it. So you can see here the fly is pretty much done, but I wanted to show you this. There's a little trick that I've learned over time. If you have any resin that has spread, or if you have material that was harder to work with, you can see here on this one side of the candy there's this imperfection, this bump right in front of my finger. So if you have an X-Acto knife, I use this for craft stuff like building Warhammer models and cleaning up plastic sprues. You can take this and be very careful when working with a knife like this. First off, this one is pretty dull at this point, so that's the only reason I'm cutting towards myself here and using my thumb as pressure to stop it. But what you can do is you can slowly shave some of the UV resin off with the X-Acto blade, and you can start working down that bump or that raised area until you get a nice clean finish. So you can see me here kind of slowly applying some pressure and using the sharp bit of the X-Acto knife to clean up that raised bump. Now, do the fish really care? Not so much, I don't think they care, but it's more so for your own confidence level when you're taking that fly out of the box. So now, whenever you cut anything, or you shave, or anything like that where you disturb the UV body that you built, it's always important to apply another thin coat. And you never want to just apply it in one area. You always want it to be, if you're going to put resin on the fly, you're going to cover the whole thing, and that way you get a nice even coat. You don't see any areas where there were coats overlapping in one area and not the other. So just a tiny thin coat of resin. I actually had a little air bubble pop up, so again, we'll clean that up real quick. And just like that, there's the feather candy. So in total, about 2 thin coats of medium and 2 thin coats of thin resin in the end. But you can see we got a nice clean body here. It's a little bit harder working with the feathers, but I really love the result of this fly. So Bob Popovics has some examples of flies like this in his books and stuff that I've seen online over the years. So I decided it'd be time to finally get around to filming one of these. And I gotta say, it's been a while since I tied one of these, and I'm gonna tie up a bunch for this fall because the Albies just showed up. So I'll be taking these out on my buddy's boat, hopefully, or fishing from the rocks and seeing if I can catch some hardtails this year. Well, there we go, the feather candy by Bob Popovics. So hopefully you enjoyed this video. My name is Mike from LI Flies Mike. Again, the fall season's heating up. There's false albacore, there's bonito showing up. Striped bass should be hitting the beaches here any day now. So we have tons of different fly fishing and fly tying videos here on the channel, with new ones coming out every week. We have live fly tying on Fridays, and we have early access of videos for members. Thank you so much for watching. Have a great season out there this year. Until the next one, tight lines.